Good morning. We are on page 426 of the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, Maimori Admur Amtsoi, the Chanukah Maimer Mika Hashem Elokeinu, Hamagbihi Losheves, Hamashpili Liresh, Shamayim Va'aretz. And we, at the end of the paragraph, the middle of the page, or closer to the bottom of the page, let's sum up what we're learning. So this is the conclusion, the ending of this long 75-page mimer, was going back and explaining the verse in Tehillim, Mika Hashem Elokeinu Hamagbihi Losheves Hamashpili Liresh, which itself is a pretty cryptic verse. What exactly it means in the context of everything we've been learning, that Mika Hashem Elokeinu is talking about the wonder, the uniqueness of Elokus, that Dafki Yisrael, Neshamas Yisrael appreciate in this world, that Mika Hashem Elokeinu, that even in existence, where the divine creates existence, we have and can connect with the two levels of the divine as they come together as one. Das Elyon and Das Tachton, Hashem Elokeinu. Like Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. So too Mika Hashem Elokeinu. And that's the joining of Hamagbihi and Hamashpili. Hamagbihi is Das Elyon, that goes up all the way to the perspective of the divine on the highest levels. And Hamashpili is how the divine comes down, Lires, B'Shamayim V'Aretz, to relate to existence. And they're both one. But the Chiddush here is not that they're one in the source. That is not a Chiddush. Atzmus is beyond Mailomata. That even in a world of higher and lower and hierarchy and structure, where there is something to elevate and something to draw down, there is Magbiya and Mashpili, there's also Mika Hashem Elokeinu. And those levels, we also can ultimately come to the total fusion and total union, seamless union of the both unions, the both Yechudim of Yechudah Tato, Yechudi Lo, Das Tachton, Das Elyon, Emek Reim and Emek Tachas. So, that's the essence of what he started learning at page 424, where he said, why does he say Magbili when he is above the whole concept of higher and lower? Because we're talking about how to accomplish it here. And that's the Magbihi Mashpili that we accomplish through what? Through Torah and mitzvahs. In the words of the Maimer, he says like this, that the Magbihi Losheves, Magbov Ashpol Zu Akolu Be'in Torah mitzvahs, Ba'ava V'yira B'bira D'Rapach. That in this world, what we do is, though the world on its own, after the tzimtzum and the concealments, you see a world that is diverse and multitudes of many different forces at work. You don't see the divine unity in it initially. So you would think it's a big work to be done. Nevertheless, the work of doing Torah and mitzvahs and Chayzer, the Yasha and the Chayzer, that God's energy is embedded in all of existence. Furthermore, like he said, mitzvahs is Tzedakah is like a zeriyah, Zeruah Latzadik, seeds that are planted. What do? We come and we make those seeds blossom, and we reap the produce by elevating every part of physical existence and turning it into a keli, into a container, a channel of God's will. That's the process. Through mitzvahs maisis that we do b'dvarim gashim, and dafke there is the fulfillment of the highest level, even higher than Torah Ed. Because Torah Ed is the illumination exactly of what God wants. But what is the ultimate plan? He doesn't just want, he wants us to implement it. So to take the blueprint of Torah, the God's plan, and implementing it, that's the mitzvahs. And those mitzvahs reach because they're transforming the darkness of this world. And the irida of the divine energy into existence, and those seeds planted in existence is l'tzedek aliyah, that this, the berurim, by transforming the darkness to light, goes up higher even than the Torah as light is on its own, the Torah. And he says this is the concept why we call mitzvahs tzedakah. All the mitzvahs are compared to tzedakah. Tzedakah is the idea of lahachis ruach shvalim, that a person who's bereft and impoverished and doesn't have anything on his own, so he doesn't have any giluyim like he does a Tao. like he called it a shvelim. So he says like this, ruach shvelim. And what does daka do? Is mechaya. It sustains, it energizes, it brings back to life. In Torah, he actually brought ani chashav kemes, that a poor person was compared to a mess. So when you give tzedakah, you're actually resurrecting the dead. In this context, so that's the gimel dalim. And what in the process, what you're doing is taking a dal, like letter dalit, and you're adding the yud of chachma, ilah, the chachma, which is barir, the chachma of Torah, which gives us the clarity. So you're bringing into a world that does not have clarity, a world that is impoverished, that is bereft, that is empty, or you could say the void of this of the light of Elokus, and you're putting Yamamshik the Yud into it. That's the Magbiya to the Yud. Your Magbiya, like he says, Hamagbihi the Yud, Maskil Gel Dol. They make from the Dalet the Hey, and that's Zdaka also. From Zedek, you make Zdaka. They're adding the Hey, the little dot of the Yud that is added into the Dalet makes the Dalet into a Hey. And the words he used, I just want to find the exact expression. And then continue summing up. I'm now reviewing what we learned on page 426. So you add this yud, gemel chesed, make the dal into yud. And so too we find it with mitzvahs, which are called tzedakah, shem with a hey. That tzedakah is, that mitzvahs is the idea of zeru lachem tzedakah v'katzuru, that you are sowing and planting the seeds. So the chsadim of chachma, like he said before, the hey chsadim, are the hey, again, hey chsadim, they got be nimshach into malchus, which is called dal, the letter dalid, which has less lamagam al klum. Malchus has nothing of its own, but through the ramach mitzvah sesed, the 248 mitzvahs, the gili ras nelyan, which come in the many different multitude of different containers. Every mitzvah has its own particular parameters and details, and affects different parts of existence. So what you're doing is you bring Shemad, the Chachma, the Teira, Shemavar, Laban, the Nega, which is the mitzvahs that are manifest in the physical matters of Deimim Tzemeach Chaim Medaber. And that's through the Yud of Chachma, that the Yud of Chachma descends below. Chachma is Bariru, Chachma the Teira that is Mislabish, manifest inside the mitzvahs, Ne Mitzvah Terer. But after the Birur, is Magbiya Liyud Zeh, we actually elevate this Yud to even a higher place than it was originally. In other words, when the Yud was in Torah, it's a high level. But when you actually implement and you actually do the mitzvah and you make a dir b'tachtein, you actually build and transform this world, Magbiya Liyud Zeh Shebetei Chadal, the Haskell Adol, he says that this Seir Merav Seitev is L'mayla Me'er Yosha De'er Dechachma the Torah Gdesha, the Yud Elyon of the Torah itself. Shemen La'mo'ed. Not just la'oir to the source of light. So it's it elevates it to the level of moir, as we learned earlier. And that's dafkid tzedakah teremim goy. Tzedakah lifts up the goy, which is as we are down below. It's meremim it all the way to the highest levels, and that's through the yud of Yisrael li reish, through the birur that Yisrael do, through the mitzvahs they do down below, that are derived from Zeh Magbiya liyud liyas hey ayidei tzedakah shetremim gate. So Magbiya begins with the Magbiya as the yud, your mamshich the yud into the dalid, and turn it into hey. But then there's a Magbiya, you Magbiya to the yud. You actually elevate that yud to go even a higher place than it was in its original. So there's two aspects to the Magbiya. Mamay lamata, Magbiya, the yud is being drawn down into existence, and then there's the elevation that elevates the yud even higher, as we learned, and that sums up what we learned yesterday. I want to just see one thing what he said about the yud. Why is Lashon the cave? Yeah. Page 423, he spoke also about Hamagbihi Losheves, but we're going to learn that now in the next section, where he talked about why Hamagbihi is Lashon the Keva, because it makes it into a Keli, into a Makabel for Elikus, that the physical world becomes a Keli for Elikus, and all the way to the highest level, so it's even higher than the Yud is on its own, when it's being nimshach, when it's being drawn down below, from Teda into existence. Okay. So let's continue.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What is this? The idea that the Yud is raising us, I guess, or the whole world, to a level that's higher from where the Yud came in the first place. Yud,
Not
it's
the
coming from
Yud is raising. We are raising through our Avodah. We are raised that Yud to even higher than the source where it originates from.
And that's because of the source of the neshamas.
That's because Seif Ma'aseh b'machshava tchila, because the plan that God, the whole purpose of Torah and the highest levels of Elikus is to make a dir b'tachtenim. So the highest levels of his original thought. It's like if you have a blueprint and an architectural plan and a contractor's plan, but you don't actually build the building, then you haven't fulfilled the purpose. So the Torah, the Yud, is the Torah which has the whole picture and everything God wants. Now you need someone to actually do a mitzvah. You have to actually put on tzitzis. You have to actually put on tefillin. You have to build a mishkan, take this physical world. So that is the fulfilling of the purpose. So therefore, it goes all the way back to the original where the Yud came from in the first place. Because the Yud is Ur. Like he said, Torah Ur. The implementation reaches the Moir, the source itself, that put the Ur there in the first place.
Understood. Thank you. Got it.
No, the goal of Torah is to bring the Shemevi L'dei Maisa, to bring it into an action in this physical world. Now that does connect ultimately. The neshamas are rooted in that place. That's correct, and that's why they're the ones that can implement it. But we're talking here about going back to that place. So it's the neshamas down below with the power of Torah mitzvahs that empower and give the resources to the neshama. And when it's done, that birur elevates everything to a place that's even higher than the original source of it all.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Perfect. Yeah. Very clear. Thank you.
So now the new paragraph, the third paragraph on bottom of page 426. Where the pages can be found at ayimbeis.com.
Where could the neshama go? We're saying that the whole purpose of the neshama is to be a higher aliyah, and I'm talking about the neshama. The neshama is rooted in atzmut. What does it mean, a higher aliyah?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
The question is that you know that the neshama is Pelek Elokam Imal, which is the highest.
Yeah, but the neshama comes down below, and when it comes down, so we've how many times have we discussed this? You've asked this question many times. So we said clearly in Ayin Beis, there's some places it says the neshama is higher than Torah. Some places it says the Torah is higher than the neshamas. Correct? And he explained why.
Yes.
I gave you the page. Why? Because when the neshama comes down below, it's not higher than Torah. Then Torah is higher than the neshamas. That's why neshamas need Torah. A neshama without Torah would not know how to live its life in this world. It needs a Torah to guide it. Torah their mitzvah Torah Now, then after the Aveda, then you can reveal the levels that are even higher than the way the neshama is lemaila in the etzem. But it's only when it fulfills it down below and actually.
Okay. This is my question. After the Aveda,
I know I'm saying because you've asked it so many times. It seems to me that you just I think you have to go back to Ayin Beis and I gave the page a number of times. He actually, it's not even my explanation. He says it befedish in the Maimorim here. And for that matter, a neshama cannot reveal its highest source unless it comes down below and makes a dira b'tachtein. It's dafke here where the neshama reveals that aspect of it.
Yeah. The thing that is not very clear to me is, and I know that you hear that after the Aveda, the neshama is reaching, how could it be higher than what she was, what she is in the beginning in Atzmus?
Because Atzmus is higher than the neshama. The neshama is not the highest thing. The neshama is still not God. There's only one God. And the Eibishter wants a dira b'tachtenim. He doesn't just want neshamas. He wants a neshama to come into this world, into a body. And that's what you say, neshama nizunis min haguf. Not only that, the neshama is actually getting something from the guf, from the yesh, that the neshama itself doesn't have. So it even goes further than that. Well, anyway, here he's saying that the mitzvahs, when you fulfill the mitzvahs, they actually reach a place that's higher than Torah Eir, even though Torah Eir initially is higher than mitzvahs. That's why he called it Torah Eir. Mitzvah is only an Eir. It doesn't have light without Torah. It doesn't have that revelation. But the fulfillment of transforming this world, I mean, this is the classic discussion that I can't say how many times I've reviewed it, but I'll say it again. There's Eir and there's Yesh. There's Eir and Keli. Which is higher? The answer is each one has something the other does not have. They need each other. It's like saying which is higher, the neshama or the guf? What's higher, Elam Haba or Elam Hazeh? So the Mishnah says, Yofish sha'achas b'tshuva ma'asim tevim be'elam hazeh mekol chayil Elam Haba. 1 hour of tshuva in this and good deeds in this world is more than the whole Elam Haba, all the giluyim of the highest worlds. And then it says, Yofish sha'achas shel kedas ruach, 1 hour of pleasure in Elam Haba is worth more than all the pleasures of this world. So the Mishnah, is this a contradiction? Which is greater? The answer is, what are you talking about? If you're talking about Nachas, Ruach, Nivra, what we experience in Giluyim, the Elam Haba is greater. If you're talking about Atzmus, what the Nachas, Ruach, Beira, what the Eibishter wants, the Etzem, Elam Hazeh has something greater. And you need both, because you want to have the Etzem Begili. You don't just want Etzem, like I mentioned many times. The child, the farm boy that cried out Kukuriku, Rosh Hashanah, is he higher than the tzaddikim that daven with kavana? In one aspect, he's higher. He can reach the etzem because of his shittas. But you still don't see that we train everybody to say kukuriku. The next year, you think the Baal Shem Tov's Talmidim said kukuriku? No, because there's something about reaching the etzem. Then there's about learning Torah, saying it the right way, the tefillas and the Torah. You can't take away from all the power of learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, even though a person with his qualitative reach can do a tshuva, like we say about Rabbi Elazar ben Dadai, that in 1 second he earned the whole Elam Haba. So you could say, you know what, I might as well sin my whole life, and 1 second I'll earn the etzem. No, you need the etzem begili, and we need both. So you need the mile of a tzaddik, the mile of a bal tshuva, then lasov tzaddikai b'tiyufta. That tzaddikim will also gain the mile of tshuva, and the bal tshuva will have the mile of tzaddikim. You need both, and you're not going to ever end up having and saying which is greater, because greater and less is only in our world. In God's world, everything has something that the other thing doesn't have, and they all complement each other. And ultimately, in Atzmos, they all join together as one, as we've been learning. But we have to go step by step, because it's the only way for us to appreciate and grow and learn. We learn level by level. You know, you need to have, you could say, if all of us, Keirach said, Madua tisnasu, call it Eidik Deshimheim. Why are you lifting yourself up? Everyone's Kaddish. Everyone has Atzmus in them. Everyone has a Chelik Elakam Mamash. So what do you need a Rebbe for? What's your answer? And if you have a Rebbe, then what's the mile of each one having the connection to the Etzem? Like we said, Lo Yalamdu Eid Ishas Reyuki Kulim Yedu Esi. But then he says, Lamiktan about Gdelam. So you need to understand that this is more nuanced and complex than just, you're not going to end up saying who wins the race. This isn't a marathon. This isn't a race that's measured in physical terms. This is Elikus. And Elikus, what's higher, Chachma or Bina? What's higher, Malchus or Keser? What's higher, Atzilus or Asiya? You can't answer that question and just say one is higher. It depends what you're talking about. If you're talking about Giluim of Elikus, Atzilus is Iyu v'chayu echad. If you talk about the Kavona Eliena, making a dira b'tachtenim, that's fulfilled below. But you never say tachtenim is higher than Elyenim. It has an etzem in it because that's the Kavona, but it's still called tachtenim, not called Elyenim. So this needs to be constantly balanced and understood from all different angles. And this is Chassidus. Chassidus is not going to be a black and white, this is a table and this is a chair, and that's that. Who's higher, a Kohen or a Yisrael? Who's higher, Mashiach or the Kohen Gadol? Mashiach is a Yisrael. He doesn't go to the Kodesh Kadosh. So I'll just give you examples on and on about these two sides that we're constantly trying to balance here. And the goal is, that's why you have Das Tachten, and you have Das Elyon, Yechud Tata, Yechud Ilah, and the Yichud of the two, because for exactly this reason. We have the godliness we relate to, we have the godliness beyond existence, and then there's the level that says both are one. And that's what we need to continuously work on and try to integrate into our lives. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Okay. So new paragraph, he says now this. Achadayin yesh lahavin. However, we still need to understand Mashakosav Hamagbihi Losheves. The focus on the word Losheves. Everything he said till now, you don't need the word Losheves. Hamagbihi, to elevate, and the Yud of Chachma comes down below, like the sparks that are seeds, implanted, embedded in existence. And we elevate existence, and we elevate the Yud. What is Losheves coming to add? Yeshiva zu mahi. What is this yeshiva? What is it indicating? What is its significance when we say Losheves? V'lomi yeshiva zu. And additional question, why is it relating to Hamagbihi? Hamagbihi is elevating. Losheves means to sit. It seems to go the other direction. You say you elevate something, it's like you stand up. You lift up. And here said Losheves, yeshiva zu ba'alo, what mahi uloma yeshiva zu ba'alo avagbo dafka. And why is this yeshiva dafka in the context? It would make sense. Hamashpili Losheves. You lower yourself to sit down. So what's the connection to Hamagbihi? And finally, Kamashkosav Hamagbihi Losheves, you say Hamagbihi Losheves. So the simple interpretation we say is that he sits on high. That God sits on high. But what does it really mean in the context of what we're learning? Ubiyud dafke. And like he said earlier, with the yud dafke. So in other words, the yud is also connected here to the Losheves. What's the connection? So the truth is, on page 423, he did say something about this. He did speak about Losheves. And there he explained it in the context. Losheves is that, just going back to what he said there, that where does the highest levels of Elikus reside? Where is it so-called sit? It's in the highest levels. So it's not about descending. That's not what Losheves means, he explained. Losheves means that becomes a keli, that this kisei, this seat, becomes a keli for the highest levels of Mekeme Ha'atzmi. But he didn't really explain why do you need the word Losheves? What is it coming to add? He just explained the words of that on that page. So now he's going to explain what is this yeshiva and its significance in context of what we're learning now. And of course, it's connected to what he says on page 423, but he's going to elaborate a lot more now. In Torah just for the record, the Alter Rebbe speaks about it. So I'm looking there right now. He says like this. So Tzedakah Teremim Gai, Yemagbiya the Yud. through mitzvahs, you elevate the yud. Losheves li is bechinas mochen l'shiftecha. That Losheves is coming to that it should become a mochen l'shiftecha. In other words, mochen we say a mochen is a dwelling place for you, a home for your seat, for where you should reside. Like when we build a mishkan, what's the base of it? What you're doing is that God can reside there, Losheves, in other words, so the elevation is in order for him to reside there. That Magbihi should come down and manifest the Yerida v'Hashpola, v'Yesh v'Hashem Melech Le'elam. That's through mitzvahs. That mitzvahs elevate existence, so existence becomes a mochen l'shiftecha, a place for God to dwell. That's what he says in Torah on page, the bottom of 38D and top of 39A. I just want to see what he says later. But the Rebbe Mittler Rebbe, as he has been doing till now, is going to explain what this means at length. Yeah, here we go. That the kavanah of the aliyah is that it should come down. That's what he says here. In Shiva, so it shouldn't just remain up there, it should come down below. And that's where he speaks about Augustus. Okay. So we will go back to the Torah, but let's learn the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, how the Mittler Rebbe explains it. Then I want to connect it to what the Alter Rebbe says. I think it's essentially elaborating on what he says there. So that's the question. The question is, what is Losheves coming to add? However, Mavur Lamaila, the Kol Ika Bechinas Halah Be'er Chezer. So he's now answering this. So even though V'omnam sounds like a qualification, however, but he means, after I asked what is Losheves, he says, however, we'll understand this because was explained earlier that the whole purpose, the Kol Ikar, the primary element of the Halah Be'er Chezer, the Magbihi, the elevation through the refractive light from the bottom up, the Reima Milas, that elevation all the way to the highest of levels, Reima Milas. So it's true, he said that the Yerida is the Tzerech Aliyah. We come down below in order to elevate it to the highest levels, but it's also the other way around. The elevation to the highest levels is not to remain there, but in order, B'shvil Yerida de Yosher, in order to come down and be mamshich down below. So there is a concept of Er Chezer and Er Yosher. There is the concept of elevating, but the goal is also to bring it down. Now, if you're thinking, you'll see this immediately, it jumps out at us that this connects to the Mamayla Lamata, Mamata Lamayla of Ayin Beis. Remember, Ayin Beis, a big part of this discussion is Hamatfila, is Aramimcha Lekaya Melech Mamata Lamayla, Aramimcha, elevating Elekaya Melech from below upward, and then through Teira, Aramimcha Lekaya Melech Mamshech Reimamus down below. So you could see here already the seeds of what the Ayin Beis, the Rebbe Rashab is explaining in Ayin Beis in general. We'll talk about this more later. I just wanted to make that emphasis. So he says here clearly that the kavanah is the Er Chezer. It's true to elevate existence, but to draw it back down below. And that's where the second verse comes to add. Mashpili doesn't leave with a Magbihi. The Magbihi Losheves is then the Mashpili Lides to come draw it back down to Moshe's bought, as shall be explained. So what is he saying? That already in Hamagbihi, the Losheves is setting the stage for the Mashpili that will come afterwards. So the goal is not just to elevate, the goal is to draw down. The Kamosha Yerida, the Yud, the Chochm, the Teira Lamato. And now he makes the comparison. Just like we learned a few lines back, that the Yerida, from the Yud of Chachma, of Teira, the fact that it comes down below, the Teira comes down below and is embedded and immersed in existence. Who b'shvil ha'aliyah hazeiz the Magbihi canal, The purpose of that Yerida is in order to create an aliyah that we should then, through our avodah of Torah mitzvahs, elevate that Yud and reveal it and transform the world into elevating it to Elokus. The aliyah says the Magbihi canal. Kach, so too the other way around. Aliyah hazes, this aliyah that we achieve, hu b'shvil ha'yerida be'er yoshar. It's in order for there to be a yerida in the light that comes downward. Remember, the focus here is not just to reach levels that are completely beyond Maila Mata, it's to bring that which is the highest levels all the way down Mamish Lamata, exactly as is Maila Mamish, Bli Levush Vehelim Klal, without any shift, without any garment, and without any concealment at all. Remember, Ani Hashem Leishanisi, Ani Rishan, Ani Achren, that the way exactly as Elikus is above, that's how it is below. That's the ultimate goal in Hashem Echad. So initial stages, we don't reach that level. But the ultimate goal is to bring the highest down to the lowest. However, not like it is now. La'asad Lavi will have that achieved. Not like it is now, where the mitzvah, that it's manifested divine in the levush of Maisa mitzvahs. That's already a garment. The Maisa mitzvahs that we do don't have that full Torah pure, undiluted, and the Ni Hashem Leishanisi light, the immutable light of Torah the physical objects of neiga. So even though you're doing the mitzvah and you are elevating and you are ultimately revealing, but we don't see it in the full sense until Lasid Lave. So that's how it is now. Kamesha Kosav. So that's how it is now. But Lasid Lave, Kamesha Kosav, Lasid Lave, Lo Yekonef Eid. But like it says Lasid Lave. In the future, there it says Lo Yekonef Eid Meirecha, that our teacher will no longer be covered by a konav, by a veil, by a garment. Next page, 427. That's how we'll be in Elam Haba in the future, that there'll be this galus of Atzmus Ein Sof below, Gilei Gomor, completely revealed, without any veils, without any partitions, exactly as it is, in the highest levels of Atzmus Mamish. But that isn't today that way. So bottom line is, what do we see from this? That the goal of Magbihi is in order to come downward, not to remain above, but to manifest into existence. However, today, it's still within garments, and therefore not completely revealed, and loss of Elam Haba will be revealed. That's like it will be in the Binyan Beis Hamikdash, in the third temple, the third Beis Hamikdash in the future, Shia Nitzchi, which will be an eternal Beis Hamikdash. The first first and second temples were temporary. They stood for 410 and 420 years respectively. But the Beis will be Migdash Adnei Ken Yedecha, Kamesha Kosev, Siviyemoi, like we say in Oz Yashir. The Koyel Osad Lavi Dafka. That's talking about the Dafka, the future. Kiyadua. Va'oz mochen l'shiftecha pa'alto. And then it will achieve the mochen l'shiftecha, like we said, the words from Teira Eri used as a claim. Mochen l'shiftecha. It will be a mochen, a hall. A mochen is a dwelling. L'shiftecha, for your place, for you to sit, for you to rest. L'shiftecha mamish. L'shiftecha, meaning l'shiftecha of atzmos, mamish. Lamata kamay lamayla mamish. When you say l'shivtecha loshen neichach, yours, you're talking about it's mamish for you to rest there. Kamay lamayla mamish, exactly as he is above. The yesa naila, and even higher. Shezeu ma'atzmus ein sof mamish lamayla me'emek reim me'emek tachas kanal. So, and even higher than what is lamayla. Lamayla is still above and it's not below. So here we're talking about not just as it is Lamaila, but even higher, because you're talking about a level of Atzmas that's higher than Emek Reim, than the depths above, and Emek Tachas. Canal, like we learned earlier, Ukamoshi is but, which he said quite a few times, as shall be explained. So clearly, Mittler Rebbe is still going to elaborate on this, even though we've already discussed this point. Let me stop here if anybody wants to ask anything. So essentially, he's answered the question. That's what Hamagbihi Losheves comes to add. It's not just to elevate, it's in order to draw that down, that we should experience below Losheves, as God manifests. Mochen L'shivtecha. So it's not like elevating the world, but we don't have a mishkan then for V'shachanti B'sechem. We want to elevate it all and then bring all that down into a V'shachanti B'sechem in a Mochen L'shivtecha, which is Magbihi Losheves. The highest being drawn into settled and integrated into existence, not remaining beyond it. But obviously, as he said, it's both beyond and within, all as one, ultimately.
Could machon come from the word muchan, like something that we prepared with our avoda for Hashem?
Everything is possible. He doesn't say that here, but that's already interpretation.
A prepared place for Hashem to dwell.
I don't know. I can't answer. I didn't research it. I'm not sure.
The other, you told me last week to look into it when I asked about Tzaddik Elyon. So I went and read backwards, and it said about Yosef and David that Yosef has a gevia, and David has to raise his cup, and Yosef has to lower his gevia, and so I think that's what we're talking about here, right? Hamagbihi Hanamashpili.
Not sure. Maybe. Sometimes Tzaddik Elyon and Tzaddik Tachan is Yosef and Binyamin. As I said, he just mentions Tzaddik Elyon. He doesn't explain what it means. He just uses that term.
Maybe
so
David was
simply mean the
Malchus.
highest level of Tzaddik. There's a rule at Tzaddik Elyon, because he wants to emphasize that you're talking about the oyer that is planted within existence is coming from the highest level, and also coming down into the Tzaddik Elyon. I'm not sure. There's not enough data here in this mimer for me to say anything about it. Is it possible? It's possible.
Because the word gevia also has.
In general, let me just say this. When I learn a mimer, I learn what it says in the mimer. There are many other mimarim that talk about these subjects. But the first thing and most important thing when you're learning is to understand what it says in this mimer. Then you can go ahead and look at other similar cross-referencing, so to speak, to other mimarim, and see. Sometimes you'll find things that are very similar. Sometimes you'll actually find things that are contradictions. But it's not a contradiction because every place speaks in its own way. So that's how I'm trained. So I haven't looked up the other places. And is it possible? Yeah. I mean, so I try to stick and try to understand what he says here. Once you understand that well, you may be able to bring other things in. Now, another rule that I at least use, if the idea is understood clearly, then even though it's nice to cross-reference, questions, what's the need for it? Like you bring, for example, that mochem may be from the word muchan, or the gevia of Yosef, or the other day you mentioned whether you could say about a certain other word, whether you can interpret it another way. It's possible. The question is, what's missing in understanding this mimer that is compelling us to add more interpretation that the Mittler Rebbe did not add? If there was a question on the table or something is not clear, then I understand that may help understand it. But I'm not criticizing or saying don't cross-reference. I'm just saying the way I learn, I try to learn what
I wasn't
it says.
trying to cross-reference. I thought that it was the same mimer, and I just missed most of it. I mean, I just came like last week, basically. So when I read back to you said
no,
to
in
understand.
This mimer, I hear you, but in this mimer, he didn't talk about Tzaddik Elyon. It didn't talk about Tzaddik Elyon. But it's fine. Listen, it's always good to look at other places because it can help understand what it says here. So if you want to post what you found about Tzaddik Elyon, by all means. Okay.
It seemed. I mean, we talked about. I'm just wondering on this issue. I didn't realize it, but it's a phrase in the Chumash and Shmos. Is that we didn't talk about that here, but
What's a
it
phrase?
Machon l'shivtecha.
Yeah, of course.
Is-
In Bishala.
Well, I
yeah.
didn't know that. Okay. I mean, essentially, it talks about a dwelling place for the Eibishter. It's like a dira. It's like a dira,
Yeah,
but it happens
Bishalach.
to be coming from
If
the
you look at the
Chumash.
bottom in the first note on page 427, Bishalach Tezvov Yud Zayin.
It's
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Shachris. Every morning Shachris.
Right,
Oz
in Oz
Yosher.
Yosher. In Oz Yosher, we say it. Exactly.
Uh-huh.
It's the same place right after it says Migdash Adnei Koine Yodecha. Talks about the Beis
Wow.
Hamikdash Shlishi. It's about the Beis Hamikdash. And they also, I see they cite here Zohar Pinchas where he elaborates on it. Yeah. Okay.
It is very possible that Mochain and Huchan is the same source.
It's possible.
Because-
Because it's really the word Huchan or Mochin is ultimately establishing something. It's establishing. So it's like an established place. Like when you say a Mochin Liyadus or something, you say an academy or a chamber
An institute.
or an institute. Yeah, right.
A foundation.
Yeah. I didn't negate it. I was just saying doesn't say it here, and but it definitely is about Machal Shivcha Pa'alto is definitely talking about establishing a place for God's dwelling, to dwell. It's like building a home for God.
But he's still going to be beyond, right? He'll be down and we'll be coming up, but he'll still be beyond. Or are we all going
What
to
level
be?
you're talking about? If you're talking about the level we relate to, Yechud Tata, Yechud Allah, ultimately, we learned that in Atzmus, above and below is all equal, and it's all one seamless reality that combines all the reality that be both contained and is beyond and is not being contained. Nitfas ve'ena nitfas. That's
This
what you're
is like
asking.
in Ayin base, it's like Yehuda Ilah, Yehuda Tata, and then the third thing.
Well, and here as well. He said it here
Yes.
too.
Yeah, I just wanted to. It's a
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
Correct. That is correct.
In Beis Hamikdash, it was this higher level. Hashomayim
Well-
v'shmei Hashomayim lo yechalkelucho.
That's what he's saying. Look, in practical, if you could call it practical terms, we mentioned yesterday quantum mechanics. Initially, all of us begin by understanding space. The space that you're sitting in right now. Everyone in this class right now is in a particular space. In your home, in your office, or wherever you may be. I'm sitting in my space. So our limited minds see space as very much parameter based. My space, I live in a certain block, in a certain city, a certain country. That's what space is all about. Same thing with time. Every moment in time has its parameters. Today is Monday morning here in New York. Certain hour, minute, second. That's time and space as we know it. When you learn Chassidus and you begin to develop deeper sensitivity to higher states of consciousness, you come to realize that time and space is just the tip of the iceberg. That everything really is energy. Every moment has energy. So if today's Monday, Monday is the energy of Gevurah, for example. Every space has its particular role and function. But then you come and say, does God occupy space? Well, even before we get to God, let's talk about, does love occupy space? My physical body is in this seat right now. What about my soul? So yes, the soul is in some ways contained within the body, but the soul does not really occupy space like the body does. And the best proof is that before a person is born And after 120 years, the soul continues its journey where it's not confined in the box called the body. Like the example I always give, where the refrigerator asks the electricity, where do you go to when they pull the plug? Electricity is not bound by the confines of a small refrigerator. However, you could contain it in a certain way, and that's what we do is when we create instruments and appliances, and essentially containers that channel electricity into our appliances and energize them. But no one's going to say the electricity is forever locked in the light bulb or in a computer or in a refrigerator or in an air conditioner. So in other words, you right away see there's something that is not exactly spatial as in physical space. So we call that spiritual space, conceptual space. So someone will say, where's electricity when it's not confined? You'll say it's everywhere. Is it in this part of the world or that part of the world? If it's not confined, if you're not generating it and directing it and focusing in a particular area, electricity is really everywhere. Just as gravity is everywhere, and just as subatomic particles are everywhere. They're pulsating not just inside of objects, they're in the very atmosphere. My point is that when you start training yourself, you start realizing space and time are not quite what it appears to be. So really, physics and science is what delves and digs deeper and starts saying, hey, wait a second, there's a whole world inside of this. You take one follicle of hair, and if you're able to split the atom or fusion through fusion or fission, what kind of energy would suddenly be generated? We know it's just tremendous amount of energy. You say, 1 second, it's a thin strand of hair. It's one cell. So we come to realize that what we understand from the naked eye with our senses is a very, very limited perspective on time and space, and in general on anything that we observe or experience. So the truth is, it's a process of growth that honestly in school, unless you really study theoretical physics or you're more of an abstract thinker, we end up usually graduating with the same limited myopic perspective on physical reality as when we entered. We're just not 5 years old anymore, so we can understand there's more things that are invisible and are more subtle and sublime. But there's no real class that teaches you, you know what? Let's move from the perceived reality to a deeper experience of reality. I firmly believe that when we learn Chassidus and teach Chassidus, we don't do it adequately at all. We don't teach the students that you're now moving from a physical reality into a spiritual reality. So they apply the same rules of physical measurements to a spiritual reality. Imagine how absurd that is. So how are you going to measure love? And how are you going to measure electricity? And how are you going to measure a concept? I think I shared with you once, I talked about this at a talk I gave. So a guy, one of the teachers of Chassidus in the Halater, in the yeshiva here, asked if he could bring his class to see me. They came right here, exactly where I'm sitting right now. They were sitting around 30 students, 15-year-olds, around the table. And to give them an introduction to Chassidus, I took an apple from my refrigerator. I took out an apple. I put it on the table. An apple, you know, this is the mouse, but it looks like a little like an apple. And I said to them, how many apples would fit on this table? Give me an estimate. So, of course, they're smart enough to understand. You measure the apple, 1.5 inches or whatever. You measure the width of the table, the length of the table, the square footage, and then you say, okay, based on that, 700 apples can fit on this table. I don't know if that's the number, 500 apples, whatever it is. Great. I said, now let me ask you this. How many ideas can fit in the brain? The brain is somewhat a little larger than the palm of my hand. A human brain, the average human brain. How many ideas can fit into that brain? The brain is smaller than the table. I asked them, 500 ideas, 700 ideas. And I saw right away, I could see on their faces that they were a little confused because they never thought about it that way. They're now forced to suddenly think about space in a new way. So I said, why don't you use the same formula? Measure an idea. And they said, well, how big is an idea? An apple is 1.5 inches or 2 inches, whatever. But how big is an idea? Good question. Is a millimeter? A millimeter? No. And then how do the ideas reside in the brain? They're not exactly like apples on a table. My point was really to show them that they have to start thinking in different terms of space. And the same with time. The reason I'm saying all of this, when you start thinking of it this way, the Rebbe Rashab in one of the Maimorim says that if you want to understand Mokim Ruchni, think of it this way. You see an apple. That's where I got the idea. An apple. Okay, physical apple I'm holding in my hand. Close your eyes now and imagine the apple in your mind. You could imagine the exact color, the contours, even the moisture. You could imagine, but what does the apple look like in the visual of your mind? How is it different than the physical apple? It's different only in one thing. It's not a physical apple, but everything else is there. But is it occupying the same type of space when you conceive of it in your mind? Obviously not. But yet you can imagine exactly that space even. You can imagine if the apple is, let's say, 1.5 inches, you can imagine 1.5 inches, but imagination of 1.5 inches is not physical 1.5 inches. Even though it's physical in the sense of a cognitive visual, but it's like a digital image. When you see ABC or images on your smartphone, are you actually seeing an image? Or you're seeing an image of an image, so to speak? My point of all this is to say that this is just the beginning process. Now we try to move all the way to levels that are beyond space altogether, even conceptual space. Can you wrap your head around beyond conceptual space, beyond conceptual time? Can you understand this statement that before time there was no time? Meaning, Bereishis bara, when God created existence, and you'll say, what happened the day before he created existence? And the answer is there's no before, because before itself was created, time. Wrap your head around that. Very hard to understand what that means, because we are ultimately creatures of time and space, even conceptual time. What about beyond conceptual time? And then comes the next level. That's what I just described as Yichudei Elad, beyond. And now the combination of both, that God could be both space and not space at the same time. So quantum mechanics introduced the idea of indeterminism, that there's a space or there's a reality that's not defined yet, a state of probability, as some call it. Okay, and then there's a state of defined state, a state of determined state. But before it's determined, it's still in a nebulous type of place that can go either direction. But then try to wrap your head around the third level that's neither deterministic or indeterministic, a level that's not space and not space at the same time, and both together. Just to give you a little sense of what it requires to really be able to experience of some of what we're learning here. I mean, I maybe I should have said this earlier in the classes, but I felt now is a good time. So you're dealing here with a really high level of understanding, experiencing divine consciousness and beyond consciousness for that matter. So each of us has to work that out as we grow. But you see, it's not a simple matter. It's easy to say in words and maybe sounds nice poetically, but really to grasp it, it's not so graspable. And that's part of less machshav tfisa beklal, that you come to realize you can't grasp everything. Some things you need to find other tools, like the example from Sir Arthur Eddington, where he said the fisherman was using a net of 1/2-inch spaces and then comes to the conclusion that there are no fish in the sea that are shorter than a 1/2 inch long. There's one small problem. He was using an instrument. His instrument only had a net of 1/2-inch spaces. You're never going to capture fish that are shorter than that. So sometimes the problem is not in the reality, the problem is our instruments are limited. So you need to find new instruments. That's why we need Amunah, Ru'usa Daliba. Emotion, for example, can experience something the mind cannot experience. You can relate emotionally to non-spatial realities sometimes more than you can intellectually. Because the mind likes to put things into boxes. Emotions don't have that many boxes. It's more subtle. So just to give an example, we need to develop new tools, and I would call them divine tools as well, to experience levels like that. Just like to listen to a song, you can't just listen intellectually. You need to open up your heart to experience a song. Is different than reading a book. It has a different type of instruments needed to experience it, and so on. Just to give some examples of this. And much more can be said about it, but I thought maybe it's good to throw this in now if you want to help wrap our heads around what we're learning here.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Rabbi. That was very, very helpful.
Thank you. So with that, Let's stop here. We'll stop here. 5 lines, 6 lines, 5 lines from the top of page 427. Anybody want to ask anything else? Any other questions?
So, is it Gevura and Chesed, the Hamagbihi and Mashpili, by any chance?
I don't know. I mean, it could be, it could not be. He doesn't mention it. Again, let me ask you, why, just curious, why do you feel that, how will that help if it is?
I just want to get a deeper understanding of, I want to know everything. I don't know how it will help.
Okay. Well, look, in general, Chesed is Yosher and Gvura is Chesed. So if that's what you're referring to, maybe. I am careful because Chesed and Gvura could be a lot lower level than what he's talking about here. You know, if you want to say Rotze and Shuv, for example, Magbiya is more Rotze and Mashpili is more Shuv. Now he's also bringing Hamagbihi Losheves. I'm wondering, see, this question I thought someone's going to ask, what's the difference between Losheves and Hamashpili?
I asked this a few weeks ago. I said Magbihi is like going upwards and Sheves is a downward action.
Okay, so fine. That's a legitimate question, how Losheves and Mashpili are different. But I would wait to see, as he continues to explain, to see if he's going to address that or not. And then we'll talk about it. But there's no question right now that he's talking about Hamagbihi is that its purpose of going up to these highest levels is to manifest them in a mochin l'shivtecha, in a dwelling below, so it should manifest in existence. So that's what we learn now. That's what we learn now.
When I didn't know that it wasn't the same mimer, and I was reading back about the Gavia, he was saying Gavia lahagbir lahagbiha, and it all had the Gav Shoresh, which was Gevura. So I thought that was kind of like what he was talking about.
It doesn't say it in this mimer. That's a different mimer you're looking at.
But it's the same concept though, because Yosef.
I don't want to get into a debate about it. It's not necessarily the same concept. It could be very, very different. And as I said, when we're learning something, to bring something else could be confusing and could also, like I said, if there's a question on the table and you want to bring something else to explain it, that's one thing. You want it for your own edification, you want to be able to connect things, God bless you, no problem. I'm just saying how I learn is I try to learn what it says here. And unless there's a question, what's the point of bringing other Maimorim? I mean, I could bring 100 other Maimorim that connect to ideas here. That's just, you're bringing one. There's many, many others.
Well, isn't there a larger message,
the point is you can't learn everything at all the time because everything is connected. I mean, there's the word Gevura, there's the word Gevia. There's other words also with the Gimel and a vase. There's Gav. I mean, there's Gavriel. I mean, it's nice. You can write an essay about it, but it's not the theme of the mimer here.
I just thought we could get a bigger picture of the whole thing and crack the code of existence.
I think the best way to get the bigger picture is to understand what he's saying here. And then when you learn the next thing, you just can't learn everything at once. That usually creates less, you get a smaller picture than the bigger picture. First, you try to understand what we learned. Then you say, okay, maybe I can relate it to others. I can assure you that anything you're going to learn at Chassidus is going to connect the things we learn here. Everything is connected to everything. But you just can't learn it all at once. So you learn what he says and try to understand the theme of what he's saying here before you make the connections. It's called first absorbing before you process.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Elisheva, I'm the master of the comment, the talk he just gave. He's given to me probably a dozen times, maybe more, maybe 2 dozen. Anyway, so you're in good. Well, I don't know if I'm good company, but you're with me. Sometimes you're right, though. Sometimes you're right, and interestingly, sometimes when you try and figure it out like that, it actually comes up in the mimer. 1 or 2 paragraphs or 1 or 2 pages down. So in that case, you had a good instinct, but sometimes it doesn't play out that way. Rabbi Jacobson, I have a question. Sorry, did you want to comment on what I said?
And again, and let me say something. In learning Torah, there's 2 things. There's called Oker Harim, and that was the other one, and Bekias, Eker Harim, and what's the other Russian? Sinai and Eker Harim. There are those that are experts in Bekias. Bekias means they have a knowledge of many ideas and the connections, but it's not necessarily in depth. And then you have the others that talk about the depth of an idea and not so much connecting it to other things. There's no problem in learning to connect it. There are people who are very good at that. They like to do that. They find an idea in a mimer, and then they find similar ideas elsewhere and find connections. However, the way I have been trained, the way I learn, is first I want to understand what it says here very solid. There's always time afterwards to make connections. So I'm not negating that process. It's just that ultimately, since I'm teaching, that's the way I teach. If you feel that's what you really want to do, I would do it, but I wouldn't do it in this class. Meaning, let me clarify. Doesn't mean you shouldn't bring it up. I'm not telling anyone, not you, Yitzchak, and not Losheves, no one, you shouldn't bring up any questions like that. I'm just saying it's not the emphasis of trying to find, because if I did that, trust me, we would sit on one page, we could sit a lifetime, because every idea here has connections to thousands of Maimorim and thousands of Maimorei Chazal. So it's Ein L'Davar Sof, it's unlimited. How far do you go? You could do that, but it's just, I think the approach that I'm taking is a far more practical one and more solid one regarding the learning. But I'm not negating the value of that approach. It's like the Gzeira Shava approach, where you find commonalities in different ideas. But I think in general, the way minds work, there are people who dig deeper in understanding what it says, and others find the connections. So I want to make it clear, I'm not negating that there is value to that. It's just a question of can't do both at once. That's my point.
I think
I had a question. Go ahead. No, go ahead, please. Please go ahead.
The reason for finding connections is to understand, for me, the reason that I would find connections is to get to the bottom of it. But
okay, but remember, you just added a good word for you, but not necessarily for me, and not necessarily for others.
Interesting.
So you have to realize that. So again, I'm not telling you not to do it, but just realize that there's value to it, but could also be the opposite. It can dilute things. You can sometimes miss the point that he's saying here because you're so busy connecting it to other things.
I understand. Okay.
So you just have to find balance. That's all. Again, I hope you take it in the right way. It's not a critique. I'm just in the process of learning. We're talking about different approaches. That's what I'm really saying.
Thank you.
I would only encourage using your mind. But remember, as a chayzer who worked many years in listening to the Rebbe, I could not afford to do that. Because if I did that while the Rebbe was speaking, I would never remember one word he said. I had to put out everything I learned anywhere else and just absorb what he's saying right now. And that's what allowed me to really retain it. Then, once it was written down, then came a process of processing it and annotating and cross-referencing and finding connections and going deeper and so on. So just telling you, it's also my very fundamental training is to read what it says for its own value. Yeah. And then start making the connections. Now, again, if there's a question, then you have no choice. Then you must go look elsewhere that may help you understand it. So that's another aspect. By the way, in the Gemara, you have this statement where a student comes to the teacher and says to him, well, we learned elsewhere so-and-so. And he answers, right now we're learning this Masechta. We're not learning that Masechta. We're learning this right now. Let's first finish learning this, then we'll talk about it. Other times you will find that a question is asked from another place and it is answered. So it's not a contradiction because each case is a case by case. Sometimes the contradiction is strong enough that you need to compare it to elsewhere. Sometimes focus on what we're learning now before we move to the comparisons. I mean, look,
Yitzchak,
a second. Yitzchak, as a lawyer, when you make arguments, sometimes you're going to bring other cases that are similar to your case, right? Precedents.
Of course.
But then you also know when you do that, sometimes you open up a Pandora's box because they'll say to you, 1 second, that case is not exactly like here. And it can end up undermining your case because they point out where you bring another case and they say that there they ruled that way for that reason. So you have to be careful when you bring other cases, whether it's actually exactly fitting here, or sometimes you can make very strong distinctions. And again, there's no black and white. Sometimes it's a great way to go. You bring another case to support your case. Sometimes another case may have nuances that would really actually undermine your case.
100%. It is precisely so. I had a question, but I'm going to hold off on it until another day, so I don't hold up people finishing the class.
You could ask. I'm here for a few more minutes. If any, but go ahead.
You have it also in Aloha. When something is coming to a bet or a rov, you cannot say, "Oh, this is similar to these things," and I paskin already, so I should paskin here the same way.
Right.
It said clearly that you cannot do it. You have to concentrate on this thing which is in front of you.
Exactly.
I'll ask my question anyways, because it maybe won't be that long for you to answer. And we've talked about this many times, but the Indian of la'asi lavo, this Indian of Hamagbihi Losheves, for example, which is essentially, as we went through it, it comes down to dir b'tachtonim. At the end of the day, it's just from what I can tell, it's the same concept, just in different words.
Okay.
First of all, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Andy?
Okay. So
Put it down.
I'm wondering, can Rabbi Teichel mute?
I'll mute him.
Thank you. So why do we sometimes have to say, or maybe many times have to say la'asi lavo? Now it's clear that the full, complete manifestation of these ideas will not be until Yemos HaMashiach. I accept that. But we also talk about how we should be trying to do this, and we do this, God's willing. We all try to do this in our own way, by the learning Torah, fulfillment of mitzvahs, acts of kindness. And each of those moments is, if you will, call it a Mashiach moment, if you will, for I don't want to be so cute, but it's a Mashiach mindset. And gradually, and as you like to say, over the centuries and the millennia, the midget standing on shoulders, ultimately we bring the world closer to a place where there can be a mamish explicit manifestation of godliness right before us, right in our eyes. But nevertheless, even though I can't say when I, let's say, do a mitzvah or a good deed or learn a good sugya of Torah, I can't say all of a sudden God appeared to me right in front of my face. But yet, like you were saying, this is not within our parameters.
So what is the question? What is your question? You're asking why we make these distinctions?
No, I'm asking why we have to say la'asi lavo, because we have it in each, if we do it the right way, with intentionality at each moment.
Because la'asi lavo is when it will be in the fullest sense of the word that we're all waiting for. And that's exactly the point. Mashiach has not come yet.
Right,
we have a
but
world,
it's not all or not.
There's a world of 0 or 1. There's a world of, but what are you saying? So we shouldn't talk about the quality of what will happen when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, there'll be no more war, no more violence, only peace, a complete world filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. So you're asking why do we learn about that? Why do we talk about?
No, God forbid. No. I'm
what
saying,
are you
why
saying?
Why do we limit the ultimate expression of these?
Because it's not Geula yet. Exactly that
course,
reason.
But
like,
isn't it? We're the Ikvas Mashiach. We're on the heels of Mashiach. So we have.
But the heel of Mashiach is not Mashiach. That's important to know.
But we're also taught. Hold on. We're also taught. Please, and I say this, the greatest respect when I say hold on. But when we talk about like moments when we have, let's say, we feel the Yechida connecting with the Eberster, like that is the notion of bringing Atzmos into our reality.
Not Mashiach yet. But it's not Mashiach. We're still praying for Mashiach. So why don't you ask the question, why do we pray for Mashiach if we already have it?
I didn't say we had Mashiach. I said we have these moments which feel like the days of Mashiach.
So that's perfectly fine. So it's a taste of, but it's not Mashiach. So what do you say? I'm not sure what's the bottom line. We shouldn't talk about the qualities of Mashiach because we may have. I have to understand. What are you saying? So we shouldn't talk about Mashiach because we have a taste of it now?
No, I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about Mashiach.
So what
I
are
love
you
talking
saying?
about Mashiach.
So what are
I'm
you
saying
saying?
what when we talk about this concept, let's just take it what we learned today. What does it mean, Losheves? And ultimately, it means where we elevate whatever all of reality.
So the Mittler Rebbe says it in the most beautiful way. When will we have this experience? Now someone will say, "Where's Machan Shiftacha?" We're fighting a war in Gaza. People are dying. People are being killed. So you could say that Naveda. Obviously, I speak at length about the building blocks that Mashiach. I spoke the other day. Mashiach is everything we do. Masenu Avadesenu is a process of bringing a little taste of Mashiach.
Exactly.
Mashiach. But what is, I don't see. So what's the contradiction? And yes, and then Love will be the fulfillment of that in the fullest sense of the word.
Okay, well then we're saying the same thing. It's not like it's limited to.
I'm not sure what the question is even.
I think, could I just put in that I think it's a question of like a completion, like Shabbos is complete. You do have these moments. You have the
fact that you have a moment. If you have a moment of Shabbos on Sunday, doesn't make Sunday Shabbos, correct?
No, I totally. That's what I'm trying to say.
To make the statement that we have a moment of it, or we have an avodah, that is a given long before this class. I mean, I don't think there's a class I've ever given that have not said that. That's a given. The question is, there a question on the table, or we're just qualifying and saying that we can have a taste of Mashiach in our avodah? I mentioned Yom Kippur the other day. You have Shabbos. There's all this full of my Moreh Chazal that say Shabbos is me'ein olam haba. Yom Kippur is a taste of the Geula. When you give tzedakah, it's a Geula pratis. I mean, there are thousands of my Moreh Chazal that talk about microcosm, macrocosm. So if that's what you want to know, that's a fact. Is there a question beyond that?
No, not a question beyond
it. If there's no question, then fine. That's fine.
Sometimes when we say la'ase lavo, I'm not even sure if those words appeared in today's class, but
yes, it does. The second line on the page, the second line on page 427, it appears all the time.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's why that's what drove my question.
Sorry. I don't hear a question. I hear a statement that which I think has always been a given that throughout our history and throughout our Veda, Shabbos is a taste of Geula. Yes, we know that. It's Chazal say it. It's not even in this Maimer. It's all over the place. And the same thing whenever you do a mitzvah, you're doing a little piece of bringing a lakus into this world. I quoted yesterday the Tanya, chapter 37, where he says that Mashiach is dependent on Masenu v'Avedesenu. Our actions are bringing a lakus. I use the example, building blocks. That Geula and Mashiach is the end building, the end structure of the building blocks we're doing right now, we've done for thousands of years, that have refined and changed the world. So that's a given. If you needed to confirm that, I'm confirming it. Beyond that, is there a question? I don't know.
No. I think we're on the same page.
There's no question, then fine. That's good. Okay.
But I think
there isn't.
Even though that we don't have the actual physical Beis HaMikdash on Har HaMoriah and the actual Kohanim, even though we don't yet have that, because the process is so messy, back and forth zigzags, we taste it here, we taste it there. It's hard to say when you're saying La'asid Levo, it's like it's saying we're going in one line, and when we get there, then whatever it is, with La'asid Levo. I think
that's why it's called a process.
Yeah. But I think what Yitzchak and I are bothered by, and I think I also is that when we say La'asid Levo, it very much sounds like we didn't get there yet, and we're going to get there. But meanwhile, there are little tiny tastes of having gotten there. So there is kind of a tam of La'asid Levo. Like, for example, if I work on my midah of, anger, and I finally conquered it. I worked so hard my whole life. I'm, 50 years old, and now I don't get angry. I don't get triggered. So that's for me a personal geula that I got. So that's like Shabbos that I got La'asid Levo. For me, I reached my own La'asid Levo. So La'asid Levo could be interpreted as once you get there, because we all get there at different times, and even like a human being's journey.
But then do you need to remind yourself that it's really not the full destination where it should be, or you just stop there?
I mean, it's one aspect of it. Yeah.
Right.
It's an
Yeah,
aspect.
Yeah, because I know that I have 7 midos.
And listen, it says that every day of the week we're supposed to remember Shabbos. And actually, there are people who prepared on Sunday. They found a good piece of food. They put it aside for Shabbos. But still, you don't light Shabbos candles on Sunday night or Monday night or Tuesday night. So in Torah, there's no problem saying you're preparing, you're getting closer, you have a taste of it, you have a mini experience of it, fine. But the Torah also has guidelines when you're allowed to bring a korban in the Beis Hamikdash. An actual physical offering cannot be brought today. You don't have the mitzvah of Yovel. You don't have many laws, actual laws today until Mashiach comes. So I don't see any contradiction between the two. L'asad love does not mean in some distant future. L'asad love can be in a second from now. It simply means that it's not there yet. As long as you have one murder, one crime, something not complete in this world, you can't call it Geula Mitis V'Ashlem. That's not a contradiction of saying that you can't be mamshich in your life, Geula Pratis, and so on and so forth. So if we're on the same page, that's it. So I'm not sure. There's no
dispute. I think there's no dispute. I think we're all agreeing, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause any confusion. It was just when I see the word Lasi Levo, and then we, on the one hand, and on the other hand, we talk about these moments that we have talked about many times for years.
Anyone who learns Chassidus knows. Everyone who learns Chassidus knows La'asad love. It does not mean to push it off somewhere. It means you can have a taste. He says it right here in the Maimorim here. Yeah. How to bring it into your avodah on your level.
Yeah.
But that's not a contradiction to the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi. And it's very important to know the difference between Golus and Geula. Even if you bring a taste of Geula into Golus, it still doesn't make Golus Geula.
100%.
Okay.
100%. I think the key word in that pasuk, the second line, it's nitzchi. In other words, it's eternal in Yemos Mashiach. We may experience it momentarily, and if like Elisheva has conquered it, God bless her. I'm still working on my intemperateness. I'm a lot better, but the point is nitzchi. It's not eternal. It's not permanent and lasting, and it's not complete. It's not, like you said, throughout the world. But anyways, I don't think there was ever any real inconsistency or contradiction. I think we were fleshing that out, Rabbi, for what it's worth.
Okay. So let's stop here. Let's stop here. The fifth line on page 426.